happy to welcome Gregory Wrightstone back to the studio. He's the executive director of the CO2 Coalition and author of Inconvenient Facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know, which is a great read. You should definitely check it out. Gregory, happy Earth Day.
Oh, back at you. Nice. Speaking this morning at the EarthX convention here at the Dallas Convention Center, so it's a great opportunity to reach out to people that haven't heard this message before.
Yeah, because I think a lot of, it's interesting because the Earth Day message, right, we are told this essentially is about being nice to the Earth. But should that be our goal? I mean, isn't the goal to make the Earth a nice place for people to live on?
Exactly. In fact, I have an article that was just published this morning at the Washington Examiner, and I asked, is it time to kill Earth Day? Because basically, when I went back and I looked, I was in 7th grade at the time in 1970 when this rolled out. You're too young to remember it, but at that point, if you're driving in your Chevy or Ford, you threw stuff out the window. Littering was rampant. If you had an empty can, you threw it out the window. It was just, our air was terrible. Our water, the Cuyahoga River caught fire. Lake Erie was labeled dead. Now Lake Erie is it's a mecca for sport fishing. The three rivers of Pittsburgh were soiled and polluted. They now hold a famous bass tournament there. Our air and water now is cleaner than it's probably been since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And according to the EPA, our air has increased. We've got 50% better air than what we did when they started this in 1990, going back to 1990.
I don't think people understand that. Because I was in Pittsburgh, I don't know, it's going back a few years now, and they had pictures of what Pittsburgh looked like. We were at one of the top of the mountains kind of on the side, and you look down and you couldn't even see the city from where we were standing. Now it's crystal clear. People don't understand that things are improving. This has gotten a lot better over the past 30, 40, 50 years.
And by almost every metric we look at, our ecosystems from the poles to the equator are thriving and prospering. Humanity's benefiting from this. And it has a lot to do with us doing the right things technologically, but it's also the combination of a modest warming. We've warmed about 1 degree since 1850. It's not, that doesn't sound alarming to me. I don't know if it does to you.
Not really.
Not really.
No.
You combine that with increasing CO2, and it's driving vegetation growth. We hear about deforestation. No, we should talk about reforestation. Again, in my article this morning in the Washington Examiner, I looked at since 1953, we've increased the forested area by 50%. In Pennsylvania, it's increased 500%. That's standing timber, the acres of standing timber in the United States. So our forested areas are expanding, not contracting. And we can go down the whole laundry list. It would take me an hour to go through everything of things that you're being told that are tragedies, that are disasters that just aren't happening. Fires are, we're 20% of the forest fires, area burned, of what it was back in the 20s and 30s. And we're being told just, your listeners, your viewers have never heard that.
Yeah, I think there's something we're really bad at as human beings, which is understanding the long-term trend versus what's in the news right at the second. Like we see a bad storm happen. We see a terrible fire happen. And of course, the news immediately embraces that this is a result of global warming. But when we look at the long-term trends, I mean, you look at the trend of people who have died in climate-related disasters, we're down over 95%.
98%.
98%.
98%.
It's a miracle.
It is. It's partially, probably the biggest part of that is warning systems. There's a tornado coming, the sirens go off, we know that they're coming, get to your basement. So, and the same with hurricanes. We can say, if you were in Galveston in 1911 when that hurricane hit, you didn't know it was coming. So we've got better warning. That's probably the biggest thing. But it's just completely opposite of what we're being told. We're being told that natural disasters are increasing. In fact, the UN report, well, actually it was the UN's World Meteorological Organization, we just exposed their study that claimed a 5-fold increase in natural disasters. And we took a look at that same data and concluded that since 2000, natural disasters have been in significant decline. They manipulate, what they do is they manipulate the data and torture the data with statistics until they get the answer they want. And that's what they did in this case. We see the same thing with extinctions. Extinctions are claimed to be skyrocketing, and they show charts. Again, we went back and looked at that same data to find that extinctions peaked in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they've been in significant decline. They claimed that there will be 1 million species go extinct over the next several decades. You know what it's been for the last 40 years? The average, again, that would take 25,000 to 30,000 species going extinct over each year. It's been 2, not 2,000, not 200, 2 species going extinct average over the last 40 years. Oh, well, we'll get to 25,000. No, we won't. The big story there should be we, being us as humanity in America, are doing a really good job protecting our endangered species, and we should be proud of that.
Yeah, I think there's a line that happens in life where you start off and you start, improving your life, maybe earning money, starting with technological advancement, and a society does that, and they don't care really about the environment until they can guarantee their own survival and that they can flourish. And then these things start to improve because people want them to improve. And that, I think, is the pattern we've seen over the United States. Early on, as you point out, we were throwing food, throwing wrappers out the windows and everything. That stuff changes over time because people start to have the ability to focus on it.
Exactly. And that's why I think we should kill Earth Day, because it's evolved. It should be a celebration of the many benefits we're seeing accruing to the Earth and our ecosystems. But instead, it's a disaster fest of horror stories that are made up. In fact, they had to invent a completely new pollutant, CO2. They call it the demon molecule. It should be called the miracle molecule because of the many benefits we're seeing, again, mainly to plant life, but then we have all those other factors that accrue and benefit from that increased vegetation that we see. Crops are breaking records year after year. And it's not just, and it's in countries like India. Our research associate, Vijay Jayaraj, is from India. He writes a lot about energy poverty. He's got an article coming out about Indian agriculture, one of the hottest countries on earth. And they're breaking records year after year.
These are good things, and you plot the CO2 in the atmosphere against age expectancy and population growth, and what you see is a real correlation there, and causation is part of it. Being able to build a society and a civilization around dependable energy is the line between an advanced civilization and one that it puts all of its people at risk.
Yeah, I use 3 terms, 3 descriptors when I talk about electricity and energy. It's reliable, abundant, and affordable. Those are the main three things: reliable, abundant, and affordable. The only way to get that is with fossil fuels: coal, natural gas, and oil. Nuclear is reliable and abundant, but it's not affordable, not the way they do it today. Right. Wind is, you can't describe wind with any of those 3 descriptors.
Right.
It's intermittent, it's not reliable, it's not abundant. It's what we call a very low-density energy source.
Let me go to what we're dealing with right now, because people are paying a ton of money at the gas pump. The Biden administration goes back and forth from saying, they say to their side, to their supporters, we're doing everything we can to stop fossil fuel productions because it's so bad. Then they come to the American people and say, what are you talking about? We haven't stopped any fossil fuel production. We're trying to get these oil companies to go out and drill more, but they're too greedy, which it doesn't make any sense to me at all. What's the truth here?
Yeah, they called the leaders of some of these oil companies up before the House Inquisition, I'll call it, 2 weeks ago. And one of the House members there was interviewed by Morning Joe, and she said, well, these companies need to produce less oil. And then about 30 seconds later, she says, these companies, the reason gasoline's so high, they need to produce more gasoline. Well, what is it? Right. Make up your mind. And those same companies they were saying 2 weeks ago, they need to produce more oil. A year ago, before the same inquisition, they were saying you have to stop production.
It's just incredible that they can say both of these things. And they know they can't get away at this point with telling the American people we're trying to shut down oil supply, because they know supply and demand, at least at the basic level.
Yeah, there's been a lot, Stu, that Biden has done, the Biden administration, to hurt oil production and natural gas production. But just this Tuesday, probably the most harmful regulation was announced, and that's the National Environmental Policy Act. And what that's going to do is reimpose climate change for every single project if that's in construction. Is it roads, bridges, and this will affect construction of wind turbines and solar farms. What it does is slows down the permitting process, And before Trump rolled back these regulations, it took 5 years for the Interior Department for a permit to be issued. The Transportation Department was 6.5 years. Think if you want to do a project, you can't wait 6.5 years for the permit.
Right.
And Trump era and his people roll back those regulations. And so it's going to be a death by 1,000 regulatory cuts for a lot of these projects.
This is tied into the ESG scores, right, where they're trying to add in essentially another layer of things they need to do these basic projects.
That's bad, but this is completely separate.
Okay.
And it goes on to the ESG scores has to do with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and
right.
So this is they're all bad.
Okay.
It's one thing on top of another. Like I say, it's a death of 1,000 regulatory cuts.
Kind of what I had read about it, in that they are kind of feeding each other, which is a real problem. Okay, so let me go to how do we solve this? I mean, especially long term. I get the sense, I grew up in, I was in high school in the 90s. I watched a lot of these environmental programs. Even stuff like recycling, to me, as I got in, even as a conservative, it was so obvious that everyone was supposed to recycle, and it was obvious good. And you go and you start looking at the details of these things, and it's not obvious at all. In fact, there's a lot of problems with it. A lot of this is because kids never hear the other side. I know you guys are trying to work on this and trying to present the actual truth here.
Yeah, we are. In fact, I'm the Daily Signal from Heritage Foundation has a quote from me. They called me up and said, we want to comment. There was a 4-H poll that just came out 2 days ago where 87% of the 4-H students, these are the agriculture, the ag kids, we call them in high school, the ag kids, 87% believed that there was this looming man-made catastrophe. And they said, well, how do you explain that? And I said, well, it doesn't surprise me because they've never heard the other side of the story.
Yeah.
All they've done is gotten preached death, doom, and despair, and it's because of us. They've never heard this. And I've had a chance to talk with young people, and when they hear the actual facts, we just did on the airplane yesterday, when they hear the actual facts, they go, wow, that's really good. And so I think this belief in a man-made catastrophic warming is a mile wide and an inch deep. But we start with the students, and at the CO2 Coalition, we're now going through an education initiative targeting school children. And I'm so proud of what we've done there. We've got our first comic book was just published, and it's pretty cool. Once Upon a Time, the true story of the miracle molecule carbon dioxide. So heads will be exploding in the liberal communities. Our next comic's Simon the Solar-Powered Cat. And so we've actually put together, got a number of gifted people that are part of the CO2 Coalition. These are PhDs in chemical engineering and physics and the like. We've put together 4 lesson plans right now. This is science-based lesson plans without the woke agenda. We're presenting science only. We've got a series of videos coming up. The videos, the comics and the videos themselves are really attractive, done anime style with our talented Brazilian artist. And so the kids, we've tested them out, just love them. They went through and they go through and read the book. And I'm really proud of what we're doing. And it's important to reach the school children with the true information. That's where we start.
Because I think, people maybe on the right side of the aisle have focused so much on universities over the years, which is great. I mean, and there's a lot of problems there, but you can't abandon K through 12. We're seeing the effects of that. And once they get to university, a lot of them are already ruined, unfortunately. They've already gone down this road, so these things are doctrine to them, and they can't understand that there is another side. Yet none of them would choose to live 40 or 50 or 60 years ago. None of them would choose that. They want to live now, yet they think they're in such a tortured time.
Exactly. They live in the best of times, not the worst of times, but they're being told they will live in the worst of times. And many of these kids actually do believe they're not going to grow up to be adults or have children. They're electing not to, the 20-somethings are electing not to have kids. They don't want to bring kids into this world.
And that's terrible.
And again, if we look at the actual science, facts, and data, it's just the opposite. And like I said, it's the Earth's ecosystems are thriving and prospering. And we see that through, I like to talk about looking through Earth's history and human history to find that other warming periods that were warmer than today were hugely beneficial for mankind. Crops were abundant, great empires arose, life was good, and it was the cold periods, and when it started getting cold, they were just horrific. That led to crop failure, mass depopulation. They went by the names of the Greek Dark Ages and the Dark Ages for a reason, because there wasn't much written during that time. The first great civilizations rose up during the Bronze Age, a really warm period. The Hittites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and then all of those empires crashed within about 100 years. It was called the Late Bronze Age collapse, and it was a sharp decline in temperature that probably led to that.
Well, I mean, I can tell you right now, I mean, I grew up in the Northeast and I live in Texas because I wanted it to be warm instead of cold too. That's just me. Gregory Wrightstone, it's Earth Day. What better day to celebrate with Gregory Wrightstone than Earth Day? The book is Inconvenient Facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know. Also, where can people get the comic book if they want to?
Well, it's been published. I just got 5,000 delivered. We're working on a delivery system right now. I've got to figure that out.
So keep an eye on the website.
And we're gonna have a series of 4 of these as a package set to go out.
Really important.
Yeah, it is.
Really important. Gregory, thanks so much. Great, and happy Earth Day.
Thank you. Back at you.